The first frost of late autumn had come early to Wyoming territory, painting the sagebrush silver under a hunter's moon. Jonah McCrae stood on the ridge overlooking Galloway Valley, his left arm tucked against his ribs in that careful way he'd learned since the stampede last year. The cold made the old injury ache something fierce, but he'd grown used to working around it. Below him, the McCrae Ranch spread out like a patchwork quilt, the main house with its stone chimneys sending up a thin ribbon of smoke. The corrals and outbuildings clustered nearby, and beyond them, 3,000 head of cattle settling in for the night. His father had built this spread from nothing, and now, at 27, Jonah carried the weight of keeping it whole. The evening wind carried more than just cold. There was something else riding on it, a wrongness that made the horses in the near pasture pace and snort. Jonah had learned to trust that instinct, the one that whispered when trouble was brewing somewhere out in the vast darkness of the territory. He'd been checking the north fence line when he'd first noticed the tracks, boot prints, small and neat. Nothing like the heavy tread of cowboys or the moccasins of the Shoshone who sometimes passed through. These prints spoke of eastern leather, city-made and impractical for the rough country. They wavered along the trail like whoever made them was either drunk or hurt. Then he'd seen the blood. Not much, just a few drops dried brown on a flat rock, and a smear on the bark of a cottonwood, but blood all the same, and fresh enough to still draw flies in the late afternoon warmth. Jonah had dismounted then, leading his horse as he followed the trail with growing unease. In now. As full dark settled over the valley, he heard it, the wild, panicked scream of a horse in distress. The sound echoed off the canyon walls, making it hard to pinpoint. But Jonah's years of working cattle had taught him to read the land's acoustics. West, toward Willow Creek. He swung up into the saddle, ignoring the protest from his weak arm as he gathered the reins. His mare, Buttercup, named by his late brother in a moment of whimsy, responded instantly to his touch, picking her way down the rocky slope with sure-footed grace. The temperature was dropping fast. Ice crystals formed on Jonah's beard, and his breath came out in white puffs. If someone was hurt out here, they wouldn't last the night. The Wyoming wilderness didn't forgive carelessness, especially not with winter breathing down autumn's neck. As he rode, Jonah's mind turned over possibilities. Could be rustlers, though they usually kept to the summer months when the passes were clear. Could be a traveler who'd lost their way. The new railway construction had brought all sorts through Willow Bend. Not all of them suited for the harsh realities of frontier life. Or it could be something worse. The territory had its share of men who'd prey on the weak, especially with law sparse and settlement spread thin as butter on bread. The horse's screams had stopped, which worried him more than the noise had. In his experience, sudden silence rarely meant anything good. Buttercup picked up her pace as they neared Willow Creek, her ears pricked forward. Jonah trusted her instincts as much as his own horses could sense trouble in ways men couldn't fathom. Sure enough, as they rounded a stand of aspens, he spotted a dark shape against the pale rocks. A horse, or what was left of one. The animal lay on its side, flanks heaving, one leg bent at an ugly angle. Its saddle was askew, the girth strap cut clean through. Jonah dismounted and approached carefully, speaking low and steady to calm the creature. Up close, he could see it was a decent mare, bay coat slick with sweat and blood from numerous scratches. Not a ranch horse too fine-boned, too soft-mouthed. A lady's mount. The mare's eyes rolled white when he touched her neck, but she was past the point of fight. The break in her foreleg was bad, bone showing through skin. Jonah's jaw tightened. No fixing that, not out here. He drew his Colt and did what needed doing, quick and clean. The shot echoed through the canyon like thunder. In the ringing silence that followed, he heard something else. Soft, barely there, a whimper. Human and hurt. Jonah moved toward the sound, hand still on his pistol. The moon had risen full, casting everything in sharp relief. Near the creek bank, wedged between two boulders, he saw fabric, a dress, torn and muddy, caught on the rocks like a flag of surrender. But no woman. The dress was good quality wool, dark blue with small buttons, Eastern made for certain. It had been ripped from its wearer with violence, buttons scattered like seeds on the ground. Jonah's stomach turned. He'd seen enough ugliness in his years to know what this might mean. He searched the area methodically, calling out, "Miss, can you hear me? I'm Jonah McCrae from the Circle M Ranch. I'm here to help." Only the wind answered, and the distant howl of a coyote. The blood trail led toward the creek, and Jonah followed it with dread sitting heavy in his chest. The water ran low this time of year, exposing rocks and roots that could trip the unwary. In daylight it was treacherous enough. At night, for someone hurt and frightened. That's when he saw the blanket. It was wrapped tight around something someone pressed deep into a hollow beneath an overhanging bank. Just a horse blanket, the kind found under any saddle, but it was moving slightly with shallow, rapid breaths. "Miss," Jonah said again, gentler now. He approached slowly, hands visible and empty. "I'm not going to hurt you. I've come to help." The bundle stirred, and a face appeared pale as moonlight, eyes wide with terror. A young woman, her dark hair matted with leaves and dirt, lips blue with cold. She clutched the blanket around herself like armor, and even in the poor light, Jonah could see why. Beneath that rough wool, she had nothing. Whoever had done this had taken everything: clothes, dignity, hope. "Please," she whispered, voice raw. "Please don't. I have nothing left to take." The words hit Jonah like a physical blow. He shrugged out of his heavy coat immediately, moving slow and careful like he would with a spooked colt. "My name's Jonah McCrae," he repeated. "My family owns the Circle M Ranch about 3 miles east. You're safe now. I'm going to get you somewhere warm." She watched him with eyes that had seen too much, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. They took everything. Said I was too much trouble to keep." A sob broke free. "My sister. I have to find May." "We'll find her," Jonah promised, though he had no idea who May was or where to start looking. Right now, his only concern was keeping this woman alive. "But first, we need to get you warm. Can you stand?" She tried, but her legs gave out immediately. Jonah could see her feet were cut and bleeding, probably from running barefoot over sharp rocks. Without thinking, he scooped her up, blanket and all, trying not to notice how light she was, how violently she trembled against him. "My horse is just over here," he said, keeping his voice steady and calm. "We'll go slow and easy. You're safe now." She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "Safe," she repeated, like she was testing the word. "I came west to be a school teacher, to find my sister. I thought it would be an adventure." Jonah's jaw tightened. The territory was full of young women who'd thought the same, lured by promises of work and independence, only to find predators wearing civilized faces. He'd seen the handbills in town, proper young ladies wanted for respectable positions, and known them for the lies they were. He settled her on Buttercup as gently as he could, then swung up behind her, wrapping his coat around them both. She leaned back against him, past the point of fear or propriety, just seeking warmth. Through the blanket and coat, he could feel her shaking. "What's your name, Miss—"
"Lila,"
her voice was fading.
"Lila Monroe. From Philadelphia. I'm a good girl. I only wanted to find May."
"You don't need to explain anything, Miss Monroe. Let's just get you warm." She went quiet then, save for her chattering teeth and occasional whimper when Buttercup's movement jarred her injured feet. Jonah urged the horse to a faster pace. The family's hunting cabin was closer than the main house, and it would have everything they needed: blankets, food, a stove. Most importantly, it would be private. Whatever had happened to Miss Monroe, she didn't need the whole ranch knowing her business just yet. As they rode, his mind worked over what little she'd said. Taken. Too much trouble to keep. The words painted an ugly picture. Slavers, maybe, or one of the brothel rings that operated in the lawless spaces between settlements. But they'd left her alive, which was strange. Usually, such men didn't leave witnesses, unless they'd thought the wilderness would finish their work for them. The wind picked up, driving ice crystals against his face. Jonah hunched forward, shielding the woman as best he could. She'd gone still and quiet, which worried him more than her earlier trembling. "Miss Monroe Lila, stay with me now." She stirred slightly. "May always said I was too trusting," she murmured. "Said the West would eat me alive, but I had to find her." She stopped writing, and then that man, Reverend Hale, he said she was doing God's work, but his eyes... The name made Jonah's blood run cold. Victor Hale was well known in the territory, a man who wore religion like a mask, running what he called redemption camps for wayward women. Jonah had always suspected there was something rotten behind the righteous words. But Hale had money and influence, the kind of man even the territorial judges stepped careful around. "You know Hale?" he asked carefully. "He has May," Lila whispered. "Or had, I can't remember. They hit me when I asked too many questions. And then..." She trailed off, lost in whatever horror had brought her to this point. Jonah held her a little tighter, fury building in his chest. He might have a weak arm, might be just a rancher's son with no special claim to justice, but he'd be damned if he'd let this stand. The cabin appeared through the trees, a small but sturdy structure his grandfather had built 40 years back. Jonah had reinforced it over the years, made it weathertight and comfortable for hunting seasons. Now it would serve a different purpose. He dismounted carefully, then lifted Lila down. She tried to stand again, but her legs wouldn't hold. Without hesitation, Jonah carried her inside, her weight no burden despite his bad arm. Sometimes the body found strength when it mattered. The cabin was cold but dry. Jonah laid Lila on the narrow bed and quickly built up a fire in the pot-bellied stove. As warmth began to creep into the room, he gathered blankets, heated water, found the medical supplies his mother had insisted on stocking. "I need to tend your feet," he said quietly. "Is that all right?" She nodded, past modesty now. Jonah worked quickly and carefully, cleaning the cuts and wrapping them in clean cloth. Her feet were soft, city feet, not meant for the harsh country, but there was strength in her too. She'd survived what would have killed many. As he worked, she mumbled through blue lips. "They said I was too plain to sell, too educated to break easy. Said the cold would take care of their problem." Jonah's hands stilled. "How many were there?" 3, maybe 4. It's fuzzy." She blinked up at him, focus coming back to her eyes. "You're not like them." "No, ma'am, I'm not." "You have kind eyes," she said, then seemed embarrassed by the observation. "I'm sorry, I don't usually..." "You've been through hell," Jonah said simply. "No need for apologies." He finished with her feet and stood, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the situation. A unmarried woman, unclothed save for a blanket, alone with him in a cabin. In town, this would be scandal enough to ruin them both. But out here, with death hovering close as a shadow, propriety seemed a foolish concern. "I'll step outside while you get situated," he said, gesturing to the pile of blankets. "There's a nightshirt in that trunk. It'll be too big, but it's clean and warm. I'll be right outside if you need anything." She caught his sleeve as he turned to go. "Don't go far," she whispered. "Please, I can still hear them sometimes. In the wind." Jonah nodded, understanding. "I'll be on the porch. You're safe, Miss Monroe. I give you my word." Outside, he stood in the cold and tried to make sense of the night's events. A woman fleeing Victor Hale's operation, left to die in the wilderness, a sister named May who disappeared into that same darkness,
And now Lila Monroe, with her educated voice and devastated eyes, under his protection. His father had always said the McCrae men were cursed to complicate their lives with conscience. Looking at the warm light spilling from the cabin window, Jonah figured the old man had been right. Come morning, there'd be decisions to make, dangers to face. Hale wouldn't take kindly to losing what he considered his property, and the law in these parts was more suggestion than fact. But tonight, there was just a woman who needed warmth and safety, and a man who'd been raised to provide both. A soft cry from inside sent him back through the door without thinking. Lila was curled on the bed, wrapped in every blanket he'd provided, shaking with sobs that seemed to come from her very soul. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I'm sorry, Nothing to be sorry for," Jonah said. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, not touching, just being present. "You're alive. You survived. That's all that matters right now." "They took everything," she whispered. "My dignity, my hope of finding May." "They took things from you," Jonah agreed quietly. "But not everything. You're still here, still fighting. That matters." She looked up at him then, really looked, and he saw the spark that had driven her west in the first place, that courage that made a Philadelphia schoolteacher think she could brave the frontier to find her sister. It was banked low, but not extinguished. "Will you help me?" she asked. "Find May, stop them from doing this to others." Jonah thought of his comfortable life, his routine of cattle and seasons, thought of the danger in crossing a man like Hale, the complications this would bring. Then he looked at Lila Monroe, bruised and broken, but not beaten, and knew his answer had been decided the moment he'd heard her whimper in the darkness. "I'll help," he promised. She closed her eyes, some of the tension leaving her body. "Thank you, Mr. McCrae." "Jonah," he corrected. "Just Jonah." "Jonah," she repeated, like she was testing the name. Then, so quiet, he almost missed it. "I thought I was going to die out there, alone, just another girl who disappeared into the West." "Not on my watch," Jonah said firmly. "Not on McCrae land. You rest now. Come morning, we'll figure out the rest." As she settled into exhausted sleep, Jonah kept vigil by the stove. Outside, the wind howled through Galloway Valley, carrying the promise of the harsh winter to come. But inside the cabin, warmth held the cold at bay, and safety wrapped around Lila Monroe like a promise. Tomorrow would bring its own troubles, but tonight, she was alive, and that was enough to start with. Dawn came late to the canyon, filtered through heavy clouds that promised snow. Jonah had dozed fitfully in the chair by the stove, jerking awake every time the wind rattled the shutters or Lila stirred in her sleep. Now, as pale light crept through the frost-covered windows, he saw her clearly for the first time. She was younger than he'd first thought, maybe 23 or 24, with a kind of face that spoke of intelligence rather than beauty. High forehead, determined chin, eyes that probably missed nothing when they weren't clouded with exhaustion. The bruises on her arms had darkened overnight, purple-black marks that told their own story of rough handling. He was adding wood to the stove when she woke with a start, eyes wild until they found him and remembered. "You stayed," she said, voice hoarse. "Said I would." Jonah kept his movements slow and predictable. "How are you feeling?" She took inventory carefully, like a schoolteacher checking her supplies. "Cold, sore, but alive." A pause. "Hungry." That made him smile, despite everything. "I can help with that. Got beans and salt pork, some biscuits that are only a day old. Coffee, too, if you take it." "I've never had coffee," she admitted. "In Philadelphia, we drank tea." "Well, Miss Monroe, welcome to Wyoming. Out here, coffee's what keeps a body going." As he prepared the simple breakfast, she wrapped herself tighter in the blankets, only her face visible. "I must look a fright. You look like someone who survived something terrible."
Jonah said simply. Nothing frightful about that. She was quiet while he cooked, but he could feel her watching him, taking his measure. He didn't blame her for the wariness. After what she'd been through, trust would come hard. When he handed her a plate, she ate like someone who hadn't seen food in days, which, he realized, might be the truth. Between bites, she said, "The nightshirt is your brother's." Jonah paused. Luke died 2 winters back. Fever took him. I'm sorry. He was 15. Would have liked you, I think. Always did favor educated ladies. The memory hurt less than it used to. Dulled by time, if not forgotten. Ma wanted to pack everything away, but Pa said to keep the clothes here. Never know when they might be needed. He said, "Your parents sound like good people." They are. Pa built this ranch from nothing, and Mom made it a home. They'll want to meet you when you're ready. Fear flashed across her face. What will you tell them about? About how you found me? Jonah considered carefully. The truth, but only as much as you are comfortable sharing. Found you hurt on the trail. Brought you here for safety. The rest is your story to tell or keep. She relaxed slightly. I've never been without proper attire in the presence of... That is, last night was about keeping you alive. Jonah interrupted gently. Nothing more, nothing less. Your virtue is intact, Miss Monroe, and anyone who says otherwise will answer to me. The fierce protectiveness in his voice seemed to surprise them both. Lila ducked her head, but not before he caught what might have been the ghost of a smile. They ate in companionable silence until she suddenly gasped, hand flying to her throat. My Lockett May's picture was in it. They took it with everything else. Tell me about May, Jonah said, settling back in his chair. Might help to talk it through. Lila set down her plate, gathering her thoughts. She's 2 years older, always the brave one, the adventurous one. When our parents died cholera 3 years ago, May said we couldn't stay in Philadelphia. Too many memories, too little money. She saw an advertisement for teachers needed in the territories. And you came west? She came west. I was supposed to follow after finishing the school term, but her letters stopped coming 6 months ago. The last one mentioned she'd found a position at Reverend Hale's mission school, said he was doing God's work with fallen women, teaching them to read and write. Jonah's jaw tightened. Hale's no reverend, whatever he calls himself. Man showed up 2 years back with money and big talk about saving souls. Built what he calls a redemption camp up at Black Rock. Women go in, but they don't seem to come out. I know that now. Lila's voice was bitter. When I arrived in Willow Bend and started asking about May, people got quiet, told me to leave it alone. But I couldn't. I went to the camp. She stopped, hands trembling around her coffee cup. Jonah waited, patient as he'd wait for a skittish colt to come to hand. The guards turned me away at first, said May had moved on, gone to California. But I saw one of the women looking out a window, her eyes. Jonah, like she was screaming without sound. Lila took a shuddering breath. I went to the sheriff. He said Hale was a respected businessman, that I was causing trouble. Then yesterday, no, 2 days ago now, men came to my boarding house. Said Hale wanted to discuss May's whereabouts. I was fool enough to go with them. You were trying to find your sister. Nothing foolish about that. They took me to a cabin outside town. Hale was there, all smooth words and false concern. Said May had been troubled, that she'd needed special attention. Said he'd tell me where she was if I'd sign papers saying I wouldn't cause trouble. Her voice dropped. When I refused, when I demanded to see her first, that's when the masks came off. Jonah's hands clenched. They hurt you. They stripped me. Said they needed to search for hidden weapons. But it wasn't about that. It was about power, about showing me how helpless I was. Tears ran down her face, but her voice stayed steady. They discussed my value like I was cattle. Too educated to break easy, too plain to fetch a good price. One of them said it would be easier to just get rid of me. Make it look like another Eastern girl who couldn't handle the frontier. But they didn't. Hale said dead bodies bring questions. Better to leave me for the cold and the creatures. They drove me out past the settlements. Took everything, even my shoes. Said if I was smart, I'd die quiet. She looked up at him then, fierce despite the tears. But I'm not smart, I'm stubborn. May always said it would get me killed. It's what kept you alive, Jonah corrected. Takes a special kind of strength to survive what you did. She wiped her eyes with the corner of the blanket. I found the horse stole it. I suppose, from a camp near where they left me. I just wanted to get back to town, to tell someone, anyone, but I got lost in the dark, and the horse spooked at something. You did more than most could have. Found shelter, stayed alive long enough for help to come. That's not nothing. A sudden gust of wind shook the cabin, and they both looked toward the window. The snow had started, fat flakes that would soon become a blizzard from the look of the sky. Storm coming, Jonah observed. We might be here a few days. Fear flickered in her eyes. Your family, won't they worry? I left markers. They'll know I'm at the hunting cabin. We keep it stocked for just such occasions. He studied the weather through the window. This is early. Even for Wyoming, usually don't see storms like this until December. I can't impose on you for days. It's not... People will talk. Let them... Jonah's voice was flat. Your life matters more than gossip. Besides, you're in no condition to travel, storm or no storm. As if to emphasize his point, she tried to stand and immediately sat back down, wincing. Her feet were too damaged for walking, and she was weaker than she'd realized. I hate this, she said quietly. Hate being helpless, dependent. You're healing. Jonah corrected. There's a difference, and you're not as helpless as you think. You survived Hale's men, you stole a horse, you found shelter. That's resourceful, not helpless. She studied him with those intelligent eyes. Why are you being so kind? You don't know me. I could be lying about everything. Could be, Jonah agreed. But I don't think you are. I've gotten pretty good at reading people comes from working cattle. You learn to spot the genuine from the false. You're genuine. Miss Monroe, the fear, the anger, the determination to find your sister all real. Please, she said suddenly. Call me Lila. After everything, formality seems foolish. Lila, then, and I'm just Jonah. He stood, busying himself with securing the shutters against the coming storm. We'll need more wood before this hits full force. Will you be all right for a few minutes? She nodded, though he caught the flash of fear at being left alone. He moved quickly, gathering armloads of split wood from the covered pile outside. The temperature was dropping fast, and the wind had teeth. This would be a bad one. When he came back inside, stomping snow from his boots, he found her standing by the window, wrapped in blankets like a ghost. She'd been crying again, quietly. I was remembering, she said without turning, May and I at the window of our parents' house, watching the snow fall. She said snow made everything clean, covered all the ugliness. I believed her then. Still true, in its way. Snow gives the world a fresh start. Come spring, things grow again. She turned to look at him. Do they after something like this? Jonah set down the wood and met her gaze squarely. I won't lie to you. What happened to you leaves marks that don't show, but people are stronger than they know. They survive things that should break them, and they find ways to keep going, to even be happy again, given time. Speaking from experience, he touched his bad arm absently. Different kind of hurt, but yes, thought losing the full use of my arm meant losing everything I was. Took time to learn I was more than one working arm. You're more than what they tried to make you. The wind howled louder, and snow began coating the windows. The world outside was disappearing into white. leaving them isolated in their small circle of warmth and light. "We should talk about practical things." Jonah said, "If we're stuck here for a few days, we'll need to ration the food, keep the fire going. There's books on that shelf if you want something to occupy your mind. Chamber pot's behind that curtain. I'll step out when you need privacy. Snow or no snow." She flushed at the frank talk but nodded. "I can help. I may have tender feet, but my hands work fine. I can tend the fire, prepare food." "We'll work together," he agreed. "Makes the time pass easier." They spent the rest of the morning organizing their small space, finding a rhythm of cooperation. Lila proved herself practical despite her Eastern upbringing, asking sensible questions and making useful suggestions. When she smiled, rare but genuine, at something he said about his horse's peculiar habits. Jonah felt something shift in his chest as the storm intensified outside. She settled on the bed with one of the books, a collection of Shakespeare's sonnets that had been Luke's. Jonah maintained his weapons, the familiar ritual soothing, but his mind kept circling back to Hale and what waited beyond this storm. "Jonah," Lila's voice broke into his thoughts. "What happens when the storm ends?" He set down the rifle he'd been cleaning. "We get you somewhere safe. Then we figure out how to find May and stop Hale from doing this to anyone else. He's powerful, rich. The law won't help. I already tried." "There's law, and then there's justice. They're not always the same thing." Jonah met her eyes. "I may just be a rancher's son with a bad arm, but I've got family, friends, people who trust my word. Hale's got money, but that only goes so far when folks learn what he really is." "You'd risk that for a stranger." "You're not a stranger anymore, and even if you were, some things are worth the risk." She was quiet for a long moment, then said softly, "May would have liked you too." The use of past tense wasn't lost on either of them. Jonah wanted to offer comfort, but false hope would be cruel. Instead, he said, "We'll find the truth about May. Whatever it is, you'll know. That's all I want, to know, and to stop him from taking anyone else's sister." The storm shook the cabin like a living thing, but inside, the fire crackled warm and steady. As the hours passed, they talked about books, about the differences between East and West, about anything except the trauma that had brought them together. It was a fragile peace, built on careful words and respectful distance, but it was enough. When evening came, Jonah heated the last of the morning's beans and divided them carefully. They ate in companionable silence, the storm a constant roar outside. As night deepened, the temperature dropped further, and even the stove's heat couldn't quite keep the cold at bay. "You should take the bed again," Jonah said, already arranging his chair for another night's vigil. "You'll freeze," Lila protested. "That chair's no place to sleep in weather like this." "I've slept in worse places." "That's not the point." She bit her lip, clearly struggling with something. "We could. That is, the bed's large enough, if we kept to our own sides, with blankets between, just for warmth. I trust you." Those 3 words hit harder than any blow. After what she'd been through, trust was a gift beyond measure. "All right," he said quietly. "For warmth." They arranged themselves carefully, a wall of blankets between them, both fully clothed, she in Luke's nightshirt and wrapped in additional blankets. He in his regular clothes. It should have been awkward, but exhaustion and cold made it simply practical. In the darkness, with the storm raging outside, Lila spoke one more time. "The newspapers in town, they'll make something terrible of this, won't they? Rancher's son found the naked virgin lost on the trail in his cabin. He held her tight. They love those kinds of headlines. Let them write what they want." Jonah said firmly, "We know the truth. That's what matters." "The truth," she repeated softly. "Yes, that's what matters." As she drifted toward sleep, Jonah lay awake, listening to the storm and thinking about truth, justice, and the price of both. Outside, The blizzard erased the world in white. But inside, two people who'd been strangers that morning had found something worth protecting: trust, dignity, and the beginning of a partnership that would be tested in the days to come. The storm was just beginning, in more ways than one. The blizzard lasted 3 days. 3 days of white fury beating against the cabin walls. 3 days of careful rationing and tending the fire. 3 days of two strangers learning each other's rhythms in close quarters. By the third morning, when weak sunlight finally broke through the clouds, Jonah and Lila had developed an easy partnership born of necessity. "You're holding the axe wrong," Lila observed from her perch on the bed, where she was mending a torn shirt with surprising skill. Her feet, still too tender for much walking, were propped on a folded blanket. Jonah paused in his attempt to split kindling one-handed. "Been splitting wood since I was 6 years old. With 2 good arms," she pointed out pragmatically. "You're fighting your own body." "May I?" He raised an eyebrow, but handed her the small hatchet. She demonstrated a different grip, angled to work with his limitation rather than against it. "My father had a bad shoulder from the war. He taught me that strength isn't always about force. Sometimes it's about finding the right angle." Jonah tried her suggestion and felt the difference immediately. The wood split clean. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was a professor of engineering before the war. Always said the world was full of problems waiting for elegant solutions." Her smile turned wistful. "I think he would have liked the challenge of the frontier." Over the past days, she'd shared pieces of her life in careful doses: their comfortable townhouse in Philadelphia, evenings spent reading aloud, May's talent for music, and her own love of mathematics. In return, Jonah had told her about ranch life, about breaking horses and reading weather, about his brother Luke's gift for making people laugh and his parents' enduring partnership. "Speaking of problems," Jonah said, glancing out the window at the snow-buried landscape, "this weather's breaking. We'll be able to travel tomorrow, maybe the day after." Lila's needle paused. They'd avoided discussing what came next, but time had run out for avoidance. "I've been thinking," she said carefully, "about Hale, about May. I can't simply hide and hope, but I also can't face him alone." "You won't be alone," Jonah said firmly. "I gave my word on that." "Your word?" She set down her mending. "Why does that mean so much to you? Your word?" Jonah considered the question. "Out here, a man's word is his bond. No banks for most folks, no lawyers, no formal contracts, just promises between people who have to trust each other to survive. Break your word, and you might as well pack up and leave the territory. It's different in the East. Contracts and credentials matter more than character." She smoothed the mended shirt. "I'm beginning to think the frontier way might be better. Has its drawbacks. When the law's thin on the ground, sometimes might makes right." "Like hail." "Like hail," Jonah agreed. "But that's why good people have to stand together, pool their might for what's right." A scratching at the door interrupted them. Not the wind this time, but something deliberate. Jonah grabbed his rifle, motioning Lila to stay back. But when he cracked the door, he laughed. A snow-covered Scout, his father's old shepherd dog, pushed inside, tail wagging despite the ice in his fur. "Scout." Jonah knelt to greet the dog. "How'd you find us in this mess?" The dog's arrival meant the ranch knew where they were. Sure enough, tied to Scout's collar was an oilcloth packet. Jonah unwrapped it to find a note in his mother's careful hand. "Storm clearing tomorrow. Your father will bring supplies. The young lady's disappearance has caused talk in town. Hale's men asking questions. Be careful. Love. Ma." "P.S. Mrs. Whistler at the boarding house packed the ladies' things, sending them with Pa." "They know I'm here," Lila said, reading over his shoulder. "Ma knows everything that happens in the valley." Jonah confirmed. "She'll have gotten the real story from Mrs. Whistler, not whatever tale Hale's spinning." "What do you think he's saying?" "Nothing good. Probably painting you as hysterical. Unreliable. Maybe suggesting you ran off with some man. He saw her flinch. But Mrs. Whistler's a sharp one. She'll have noticed if your things were disturbed. If you left unwillingly. Lila sank onto the bed, suddenly looking very young. In 3 days, my reputation will be in ruins. An unmarried woman, missing, found in a man's cabin. Stop. Jonah's voice was firm. Your reputation isn't what matters here. Your life matters. The truth about May matters. Let the gossips wag their tongues. Easy for you to say. A man's reputation can survive scandal. A woman's... She shook her head. No school board will hire me now. No respectable boarding house will take me. Scout, sensing distress, padded over to rest his head on Lila's knee. She petted him absently, drawing comfort from the simple gesture. There are other kinds of respectable. Jonah said, ranch families need teachers for their children. Small towns need educated folks willing to work hard. The frontier's more forgiving than you might think, for those who prove themselves. Prove myself. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I couldn't even find my sister without becoming a victim myself. You're not a victim. You're a survivor. Jonah moved to sit across from her, maintaining careful distance. And you're closer to finding May than anyone's gotten. That took courage. Foolishness, more like. Same thing, sometimes. That drew a small, genuine smile. They spent the rest of the day preparing for the return to civilization such as it was in Wyoming territory. Lila practiced walking on her healing feet, determined not to be carried into town like an invalid. Jonah cleaned weapons and checked supplies, mind already working on strategies for dealing with Hale. That evening, as they shared what might be their last meal alone together, Lila asked, what do you know about Hale's operation, really know? Not just suspect. Jonah set down his coffee cup. He arrived 2 years back with money and connections. Bought the old Thornfield place up at Black Rock Big House. Outbuildings, easy to defend. Started calling it a redemption camp for fallen women. Some girls went willingly, thinking it was honest work. Others were brought. Lila finished. The sheriff turns a blind eye. Says Hale's cleaning up the territory, giving unfortunate women a second chance. But like I said, women go in and don't come out. Hale claims they've been placed in positions back east or married off to settlers needing wives. But no letters, no word. None that anyone's seen. Jonah's jaw tightened. There was a girl last year, Annie Schultz. Her brother came looking. Said she'd never have gone silent. Sheriff told him to stop making trouble. Brother pushed too hard, ended up shot in a saloon brawl that witnesses say he didn't start. Lila absorbed this grimly. So Hale has the law in his pocket? The local law, but there's federal marshals, territorial judges. Just need evidence they can't ignore. Evidence. She touched her throat where the missing locket would have been. I have nothing but my word. Your word and these. Jonah gestured to her healing injuries. And maybe more, if we're smart about it. They talked strategy until the fire burned low, plans taking shape between them. Lila's quick mind saw angles Jonah hadn't considered, while his knowledge of the territory provided practical grounding. By the time they prepared for sleep, same arrangement as the previous nights. Careful and proper, they had the beginnings of something that might work. In the darkness, Lila spoke softly. I've been trying to remember exactly what the women in the windows looked like. Their faces. There was one red hair, like May's, but thinner, sadder. What if... Don't torture yourself with what-ifs. Jonah advised, we'll find the truth soon enough. I know, it's just these 3 days, as hard as they've been. There's been a kind of peace to them. Tomorrow, back in the world, fighting Hale. I'm frightened. Jonah stared at the ceiling, choosing his words carefully. Fear's not shameful. It's what you do despite the fear that matters. And you don't have to do it alone. You keep saying that. Because it's true. She was quiet so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then
I dreamed about May last night. She was trying to tell me something, but I couldn't hear over the wind. Do you believe in dreams?
Jonah. I believe in paying attention, he said. Dreams, instincts, the way animals act before a storm. It all tells us something if we listen.
Then I'll listen harder.
Morning came crisp and bright. The storm's fury replaced by pristine calm. The world outside was transformed, buried under feet of snow that sparkled like diamonds in the sun. Beautiful and treacherous in equal measure, much like the situation they faced. Jonah was outside assessing the trail when he heard horses approaching. His father appeared first, leading a pack horse, followed by a surprising companion, Deputy Rosa Ortega, the only lawman in the territory Jonah trusted completely. Son. Samuel McCrae dismounted with the easy grace of a lifetime horseman. Your mother sends her regards and about half the pantry.
Oh, Mr. McCrae.
Rosa touched her hat brim.
Heard you might need some official presents for what comes next.
Jonah glanced back at the cabin. How much do you know?
Enough, Rosa said.
Her weathered face was grim. That young lady's not the first to go missing after asking about Hale's camp. Just the first to survive to tell about it. Samuel had already started unloading supplies. Brought the ladies things from Mrs. Whistler. Also some clothes from your mother. She figured Eastern dresses might not suit current circumstances. The cabin door opened, and Lila emerged, wrapped in blankets but walking on her own. She'd braided her hair and washed her face, presenting as dignified an appearance as circumstances allowed.
Miss Monroe.
Rosa stepped forward.
Deputy Ortega, I'd like to hear your account of what happened, if you're willing.
Lila lifted her chin. More than willing, Deputy, though I doubt the sheriff will care to hear it. The sheriff's not the only law in the territory, Rosa replied. Tell me everything. They moved inside, where it was warmer, as Lila related her story clear, detailed. Unflinching, Jonah watched his father's face darken and Rosa's hand tighten on her coffee cup. When she finished, the deputy was quiet for a long moment. I believe you, Rosa said finally. Question is, what do we do about it? Hale's got money, men, and the sheriff's here. Your word against his won't be enough. Then we get more than my word. Lila said.
Those women in his camp, they have stories too.
Families looking for them. Papers that don't add up.
You're talking about building a federal case,
Rosa mused. That's dangerous territory. Miss Monroe, Hale won't sit idle while you gather evidence against him. Neither will I, Jonah interjected. The McCrae Ranch stands behind Miss Monroe. Anyone wants to hurt her has to go through us. Samuel nodded agreement. The Circle M's been here longer than Hale and will be here long after he's gone. We protect our own.
I'm not your own,
Lila protested.
I'm just...
You're under McCrae protection, Samuel said firmly. That makes you ours to defend. My son gave his word, and that's McCrae word. It stands. Lila blinked rapidly. Overcome. Rosa pretended not to notice, giving her time to compose herself. All right, the deputy said. Here's what we do. Miss Monroe, you'll come to town with me. Make an official statement. I'll file it with the territorial office, not just local. That creates a record Hale can't make disappear. Then we start quiet-like, gathering information about other missing women.
What about May? Lila asked.
Rosa's expression was sympathetic, but honest. We'll look for her first, but prepare yourself if she's been in that camp for 6 months.
I know,
Lila said quietly.
I just need to know what happened to her, good or bad.
They spent another hour planning, then prepared to leave. The clothes misses. McCrae had sent fit reasonably well practical wool skirts and sturdy boots, warm coat and gloves. Lila emerged from behind the curtain, transformed from Eastern lady to frontier woman. You look ready to take on the territory, Jonah observed. She managed a smile.
Looks can be deceiving, but I'm learning.
As they prepared to mount up Lila on the gentlest mare Samuel had brought, she turned back to look at the cabin.
"Strange to think I'll probably never see this place again," she said. "It saved my life."
"You saved your own life," Jonah corrected.
"This was just shelter."
"It was more than that." She met his eyes. "It was a place where I remembered who I am. Not what they tried to make me, but who I choose to be." "And who's that?"
"Someone who doesn't give up,"
she said simply. "Someone who finds the truth, no matter the cost." As they rode out into the brilliant morning, 5 figures against the white landscape, Jonah felt the weight of coming trials, but he also felt something else, a certainty that this woman, this Eastern school teacher with her damaged feet and unbroken spirit, was going to change things in the valley. The storm had passed, but the real tempest was just beginning, and Jonah McCrae, rancher's son with a weak arm and a strong sense of justice, was ready to ride into it beside her. Behind them, the cabin stood empty but for the lingering warmth of the stove and the memory of sanctuary found in the midst of storm. Ahead lay Willow Bend, where gossip and danger waited in equal measure. But they would face it together. That, Jonah thought as he watched Lila straighten in her saddle despite the pain it must cause, was what mattered. The choice to stand together against whatever came next, the choice to hold tight to truth, no matter what lies Hale might spin. The choice that had begun when a rancher's son found a lost woman on the trail and decided her life mattered more than his comfort. That choice would echo through the valley before all was done. The ride into Willow Bend felt longer than usual, every hoofbeat carrying them closer to confrontation. As they crested the final ridge, the town spread below them, a collection of wooden buildings huddled along the main street, smoke rising from chimneys into the crystal-clear morning air. "Remember," Rosa said quietly, "hold your head high. You've done nothing wrong." Lila straightened in her saddle, though Jonah could see the tension in her shoulders. They'd barely reached the edge of town when the whispers started. Faces appeared at windows. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, and more than one woman pulled her children closer as they passed.
"That's her,"
someone muttered.
"The school teacher who disappeared."
"Spent 3 days alone with the McCrae boy," another voice added, not quite low enough.
"Shameless,"
came a third whisper. Jonah urged his horse closer to Lila's, making his protection clear. His father flanked her other side, and Rosa led the way, badge prominent. The message was unmistakable. Lila Monroe rode under their guard. At the sheriff's office, a crowd had already gathered. Sheriff Watson stood on the boardwalk, thumbs hooked in his vest, expression carefully neutral. Beside him, Jonah recognized one of Hale's men, a rat-faced fellow named Crenshaw. "Miss Monroe," the sheriff called out. "Whole town's been worried about you, Mr. Hale especially. Says you left his employment without notice. Took some valuable items with you."
"That's a lie,"
Lila said clearly, her voice carrying across the street.
"I was never in his employment. His men abducted me, robbed me, and left me to die in the wilderness."
Gasps rippled through the crowd. The sheriff's face darkened. "Those are serious accusations. Miss, you sure you want to make them public?" "I'm sure." Lila dismounted with careful dignity, accepting Jonah's steadying hand. "I want to file a formal complaint against Victor Hale and the men who acted on his orders." "Now, let's not be hasty." Sheriff Watson stepped forward. "You've been through an ordeal. Clearly, maybe you're confused." "My mind is perfectly clear," Lila interrupted. "As clear as it was when I asked you for help finding my sister 2 weeks ago, and you told me to stop causing trouble." Rosa dismounted, moving to stand beside Lila. "The lady wants to file a complaint. Sheriff, that's her right." "Since when do you have jurisdiction in my town, Ortega?" "Since a citizen of the territory was kidnapped and assaulted," Rosa replied calmly. "That makes it territorial business." The crowd pressed closer, sensing drama. Jonah spotted Mrs. Whistler pushing through, the boarding house owner's face set in determined lines. "I have something to say," Mrs. Whistler announced. "Miss Monroe's room was ransacked the night she disappeared. Looked like someone was searching for something. Her door was forced. I've kept the broken lock as evidence." "Could have been thieves," Crenshaw suggested, speaking for the first time. "Town's full of drifters." "Thieves who only targeted one room, who took nothing from anyone else," Mrs. Whistler snorted. "I wasn't born yesterday. Young man." More voices joined in, some supporting, others skeptical. The crowd's mood shifted like quicksilver, and Jonah sensed danger in it. Mobs could turn ugly fast in frontier towns. "Enough," a new voice cut through the noise. The crowd parted for a woman in expensive clothes, Margaret Thornfield, the banker's wife and self-appointed moral guardian of Willow Bend. "I think we all know what really happened here. A young woman, unchaperoned, making wild accusations after spending 3 nights alone with a man. The real question is whether she's trying to trap him into marriage or simply cover her own loose behavior." Lila went white, then red. Before she could respond, Jonah stepped forward. "Mrs. Thornfield, I'd be careful about spreading false gossip. Miss Monroe was injured and in danger. I provided shelter, nothing more. Any suggestion otherwise is an insult to both her honor and mine." "Honor, Mrs." Thornfield laughed, a brittle sound. "What honor can she claim now? What decent man would have her after?" "I would." The words left Jonah's mouth before he'd fully formed the thought. The crowd went silent, and he felt every eye on him. "Well, in for a penny. I'd be proud to have Miss Monroe as my wife. She's brave, intelligent, and honest, which is more than some in this town can claim." Lila stared at him, lips parted in shock. The crowd erupted in fresh whispers. But before anyone could respond further, the thunder of hooves announced new arrivals. Victor Hale rode in like a man who owned the world, flanked by 6 hard-faced riders. He was everything Jonah despised: smooth, well-dressed, radiating false concern. The kind of man who smiled while sliding a knife between your ribs. "Miss Monroe," Hale dismounted with theatrical worry. "Thank God you're safe. When my men reported you'd run off in distress, I feared the worst." "Your men," Lila said, voice steady despite her pallor, "stripped me, robbed me, and abandoned me to die." Hale's expression was a masterwork of shock and confusion. "My dear girl, what are you saying? You came to my establishment asking about employment, became hysterical when I had no positions available, and fled before I could offer assistance. I sent men to find you, to help. With help like yours, a woman needs no enemies." Rosa interjected. Hale's eyes narrowed slightly before his mask of concern slipped back into place. "Deputy Ortega, always a pleasure, though I wonder at your involvement in a simple case of female hysteria." "Nothing hysterical about assault and attempted murder," Rosa replied. "Murder," Hale laughed, a rich sound that invited others to join. Several did. "Really, Deputy, the girl is clearly disturbed, grief-stricken about her sister, perhaps creating fantasies." "Where is my sister?" Lila stepped forward, and Jonah moved with her, hand near his gun. "Where is May Monroe?" "As I told you when you visited, she left my employment months ago. Went to California, I believe. Found a position with a good family." Hale's smile was sympathetic. "I understand your distress, but making wild accusations won't bring her back." "Then you won't mind if we verify that," Rosa said. "See your employment records. Correspondence about her placement." "Of course not, though I'll need a proper warrant. We must observe the law, after all." His smile sharpened. "Unlike some, I don't believe in taking the law into my own hands, or taking advantage of vulnerable young women." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Jonah felt his temper rising, but Lila's hand on his arm stopped him. "Mr. Hale,"
she said, voice carrying clearly. I accuse you formally, before these witnesses, of kidnapping, robbery, and attempted murder. I accuse you of holding women against their will at your so-called redemption camp. And I believe you know exactly what happened to my sister. Prove it, Hale said softly, all pretense of sympathy gone. Prove any of it, you little— He caught himself, smile returning. Forgive me, the accusations are so outrageous. I momentarily forgot myself. Sheriff, I trust you'll handle this appropriately. The young woman is clearly suffering from delusions brought on by her ordeal. Perhaps a doctor should examine her. Now wait a minute. Samuel McCrae spoke for the first time, his presence commanding respect. Miss Monroe is under McCrae protection. Anyone wants to examine her or anything else better come through us first. McCrae protection, Hale repeated. How quaint. Tell me, Samuel, do you really want to stake your ranch's reputation on the word of a hysterical woman your son's already compromised himself with his rash offer of marriage? How much more will your family sacrifice for a stranger's delusions? As much as it takes. Samuel said simply, I've known you 2 years. Hale. Known my son 27. I'll take his word and Miss Monroe's over yours any day. The tension stretched taut. Hale's men shifted hands toward weapons, and Jonah saw answering movements from some townspeople. Violence hung by a thread. Then Mrs. Whistler pushed forward again. I've been thinking, she announced loudly. About that night Miss Monroe disappeared. Seems to me I saw some familiar faces near my boarding house. Men who work for Mr. Hale. Funny coincidence, that. You're mistaken, old woman, Crenshaw snarled. But Mrs. Whistler stood her ground. My eyes work fine, thank you, and my memory's even better. She looked around the crowd. Who else saw things that night? Who else has questions about women who go into that camp and never come out? Enough, Sheriff Watson finally intervened. Everyone calm down. Miss Monroe, you can file your complaint. Mr. Hale, you'll have a chance to answer it proper. This is a matter for the law, not mob justice. Of course, Hale agreed smoothly. I have nothing to hide. My camp is open to any legal inspection. My records are meticulous, and I'm sure when Miss Monroe recovers from her ordeal, she'll remember events more clearly. The threat in his words was subtle but unmistakable. Lila lifted her chin higher. My memory is perfect, Mr. Hale, as is my determination to see justice done. Justice! Hale mounted his horse with elegant ease. A noble concept, though I find it's often confused with revenge by those who've suffered disappointments. He touched his hat brim mockingly. Good day, Miss Monroe, Mr. McCrae. I do hope your arrangement brings you happiness, though I suspect you'll find the cost higher than anticipated. He rode off with his men, leaving a wake of whispers and speculation. The crowd began to disperse, but not before Jonah caught plenty of meaningful looks and heard more than a few crude comments. Inside the sheriff's office, Lila gave her statement to Rosa while Sheriff Watson sat in sullen silence. She was thorough, detailed, and unflinching, even when describing the most humiliating parts of her ordeal. Jonah stood by the window, keeping watch, pride and anger warring in his chest. When she finished, Rosa nodded. I'll file this with the territorial office today. Sheriff, I'll need copies of any reports about missing women over the past 2 years. Could take time to gather those, Watson muttered. Then you'd better start, Rosa said pleasantly. Miss Monroe, where will you be staying? Before Lila could answer, Mrs. Whistler appeared in the doorway. With me, of course. Her room's been cleaned and repaired, though after Mr. McCrae's declaration, perhaps we should discuss more permanent arrangements. Lila colored. That was— Mr. McCrae was defending my honor. He didn't mean— I meant it, Jonah said quietly. All eyes turned to him. Not saying you have to accept,
But I meant it. The offer stands." The silence stretched uncomfortable. Finally, Rosa cleared her throat. "Well, that's between you two to sort out. For now, Mrs. Whistler's boarding house seems the safest option. I'll post a man to watch tonight, just in case." They filed out of the sheriff's office to find the street still buzzing with gossip. Several women clutched their skirts aside as Lila passed, but others working women. Ranch wives nodded respectfully. The town was dividing already. Jonah realized. Those who believed Hale's version and those who questioned it. At the boarding house, Lila turned to face her protectors. "Thank you, all of you. I know what this cost your reputations, your standing." "Right's right," Samuel said gruffly. "Don't thank us for doing what any decent folk would do." "Decent folk seem to be in short supply," Lila observed, glancing at the women still whispering across the street. "They're scared," Rosa said. "Hale's got power, and crossing him has consequences. But you've started something here. Others might find courage now to speak up." "I hope so." Lila's shoulders sagged slightly, exhaustion showing through. "For May's sake, I hope so." Jonah wanted to comfort her, but the street was full of eyes. Instead, he simply said, "I'll come by tomorrow. We'll start looking for those other women Rosa mentioned." Lila smiled slightly. "You've done enough. Jonah, your offer, that was generous but unnecessary. I won't hold you to words spoken in anger." "Wasn't anger," he said. "And I'm not one to speak words I don't mean. Think on it. No rush, no pressure. But think on it." He left her there, standing in Mrs. Whistler's doorway with the morning sun making a halo of her dark hair. As he rode home beside his father, the older man finally spoke. "You sure about this? Son, what you offered?" Jonah thought about 3 days in a cabin, about trust given despite terror, about a woman who faced down her tormentor without flinching. "I'm sure. It'll be a hard road. Hale won't let this go, and the town gossips will make her life miserable." "She's already on a hard road. At least she won't walk it alone." Samuel nodded slowly. "Your mother will want to meet her proper. Invite her to Sunday dinner." "After what happened today, she might not want to be seen with us." "After what happened today," Samuel corrected. "She needs to know she has family in this valley. Real family, not just protection." As they rode toward home, Jonah thought about family and choice, about reputation and truth. The easy path would be to let Lila fight her battle alone, to protect the McCrae name from scandal. But the easy path had never been the McCrae way. Behind them, Willow Bend buzzed with gossip. "Rancher's son found the naked virgin lost on the trail," some whispered, adding their own sordid details. But others told a different story of courage in the face of power, of truth spoken despite consequence. The battle lines were drawn, and tomorrow, the real fight would begin. The anonymous letter arrived 3 days later, slipped under the boarding house door while the town slept. Lila found it when she came down for breakfast, her name written in careful block letters across brown paper. "Want to find May, come to Black Rock tonight, alone. Tell no one or she dies." Her hands trembled as she read it again. Mrs. Whistler, bustling around the kitchen, noticed her stillness. "What is it, dear?" Lila folded the letter quickly. "Just a note, nothing important." But her mind raced. 3 days of careful investigation with Rosa had turned up. Little Hale's records were indeed meticulous, showing women placed in positions across the territory, all with glowing reports. Too glowing, Rosa had muttered. Too perfect, but without proof of forgery. They had nothing. Now this. "I think I'll take a walk," Lila said, forcing casualness into her voice. "Clear my head." Mrs. Whistler frowned. "Not alone, surely after everything. Just around town. I can't hide forever." She escaped before more objections could be raised. The morning air was crisp, autumn settling fully over the valley. Lila walked without destination, the letter burning in her pocket, until she found herself at the small church at the edge of town. Inside, dust motes danced in colored light from the windows. She sat in a back pew, trying to think. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, but if there was even a chance May was alive. Heavy thoughts for a Thursday morning. She startled. Jonah stood in the doorway, hat in hand, concern etched on his features. "How did you know I was here?" "Saw you from the mercantile. You looked like someone carrying the world." He moved closer, not quite sitting. "What's wrong?" Lila fought the urge to tell him. He'd stop her, or insist on coming, and the letter had been clear. Just thinking, about May, about everything. Jonah studied her with those steady eyes that seemed to see too much. "You're a terrible liar." "I'm not." "Your left hand is clenched so tight your knuckles are white. You keep touching your pocket, and you're in a church, but you haven't looked at the cross once." He sat beside her then, careful to leave proper space between them. "Talk to me." The words wanted to spill out. 3 days of working together had built on the foundation laid in the cabin. She trusted him, but May's life might hang in the balance. "I can't," she whispered. "I'm sorry, but I can't." His jaw tightened. "Hale got to you somehow. Threatened you." "Please don't ask me. Just trust that I know what I'm doing." "Do you?" His voice was quiet but intense. "Because from where I sit, you look like someone about to do something dangerous. Alone." She stood abruptly. "I should go. Mrs. Whistler will wonder." He caught her hand gently. "Lila, whatever it is, we can face it together. You don't have to carry this alone." For a moment, she wavered. His hand was warm, calloused from work, steady. Everything about him promised safety, partnership, a sharing of burdens. But she thought of May, possibly alive, possibly suffering, and pulled away. "Some things have to be faced alone," she said, and left before he could respond. The rest of the day crawled by. Lila went through the motions helping Mrs. Whistler with mending, visiting Rosa to review more records, smiling and nodding at the few townspeople who still acknowledged her. But her mind was on the coming night and what waited at Black Rock. As sunset approached, she made her preparations. Dark clothes borrowed from Mrs. Whistler's late husband, a kitchen knife tucked into her boot, a story about retiring early with a headache. The boarding house settled into evening quiet. Lila waited until she heard Mrs. Whistler's gentle snores, then slipped out the back door. The night was clear, stars brilliant in the autumn sky. She'd memorized the route to Black Rock from the maps in Rosa's office 5 miles north, following the old mining road. She'd barely reached the edge of town when a figure stepped from the shadows. Her heart leaped to her throat before she recognized him. "Going somewhere?" Jonah asked mildly. "You followed me. You're wearing men's clothes and sneaking around after dark. Didn't take much detecting." He moved closer, and she could see he was armed, pistol at his hip, rifle across his back. "Black Rock, I'm guessing." The letter said alone. "What letter?" When she hesitated, he sighed. "Lila, I've been watching Hale's men watch you for 3 days. Did you really think they'd send an honest invitation? This is a trap." "I know that," the words burst out. "But what if it's not? What if May is there? What if she's alive and needs help? I can't just ignore it." "And you can't walk into an obvious trap either." He stepped closer. "Show me the letter." Reluctantly, she handed it over. He read it by moonlight, face grim. "Tell no one or she dies." He quoted. Classic, make you isolated, vulnerable. He handed it back. "If you're going, I'm going, not negotiable." "They'll see you." "No, they won't." A slight smile touched his lips. "You're not the only one who can be sneaky. I'll shadow you. Stay out of sight unless needed. You'll appear to be alone." She wanted to argue, but relief was stronger. You promise to stay hidden unless absolutely necessary. Unless someone tries to hurt you, yes. They set out together, then apart, Lila on the road. Jonah melting into the brush like smoke, even knowing he was there. She could barely track him. It should have been comforting, but the night pressed close, full of whispers and shadows. Black rock loomed against the stars, the old Thornfield house squatting like a spider in a web of outbuildings. Lights burned in some windows, but the grounds seemed deserted. Too deserted. Lila's nerves screamed warnings with every step. At the main gate, another note was pinned to the post. Stable, come alone. The stable was dark, smelling of hay and horses and something else, fear, sweat, and despair. Lila entered carefully, hand on her hidden knife. "May," she called softly. "It's Lila. Are you here?" Movement in the shadows. But the figure that emerged wasn't May. A young woman, rail-thin, with the hollow eyes of someone who'd seen too much. "You're her sister," the woman said, not a question. "I can see it in your face, same stubborn chin." "You know May is she." "Listen quick," the woman interrupted. "I don't have long. They'll miss me. Your sister was here, tried to teach us letters, give us hope. Hale didn't like that." "Was?" Lila's heart clenched. "Where is she now?" "Dead." The word fell like a stone. "Last winter, lung fever, though Hale wouldn't call a real doctor. Said prayer would cure her if God willed it." The woman spat. "She died calling your name." Lila's knees nearly buckled. She'd known, somewhere deep, but hearing it confirmed. "I'm sorry," the woman continued. "She was kind, talked about you all the time, said you'd come looking." "Where?" Lila's voice broke. She tried again. "Where is she buried?" "Behind the old chapel. No marker Hale doesn't mark the graves, but I know which one. I helped dig it." The woman glanced nervously toward the house. "You need to go. This was a test. See if you'd come alone. When they realize you did." The stable door slammed open. 3 men entered, Crenshaw in the lead, all carrying lanterns that threw wild shadows. "Well, well," Crenshaw grinned. "Little Mouse took the cheese. Mister, Hale will be pleased." "Run!" the woman shouted, but there was nowhere to go. The men spread out, blocking exits. Lila pulled her knife, knowing it was futile against 3 armed men. "Let us go. You have nothing to gain." "Got our orders," Crenshaw said. "You've been making trouble, asking questions. Mister, Hale thinks you need a lesson in minding your own business." They moved closer, and Lila braced herself. But before they could grab her, a voice rang out from the hayloft. "That's far enough." Jonah stood above them, rifle trained on Crenshaw. "Drop your weapons, now!" "McCrae," Crenshaw snarled. "Should have known. The boss figured you might tag along." He raised his voice. "Boys." More men poured in from the back room, from outside. 6, 7, 8. Too many. Jonah was good, but not that good. "Interesting standoff," a new voice observed. Victor Hale entered, immaculate despite the late hour. "Mr. McCrae, I believe you're trespassing." "Just evening the odds." Jonah replied, rifle never wavering. "Ah, but are they even?" Hale smiled. "Rebecca, dear, come here." The woman who'd warned Lila shuffled forward, head down. Hale put a paternal hand on her shoulder that made Lila's skin crawl. "You see," Hale continued, "Rebecca here broke the rules, spoke to an outsider without permission. That usually carries severe punishment, but I'm feeling merciful. Her fate now depends on you, Miss Monroe." "Don't," Rebecca whispered. "Whatever he wants, don't." Hale's hand tightened, and she gasped. "Quiet, dear. Adults are talking." He focused on Lila. "It's simple. You come with us. Spend some time learning to be less troublesome. and Rebecca goes free. Refuse, and, well, examples must be made.
You can't, Jonah started.
Can I? Hale laughed. On my own property, with a runaway bondservant who violated her contract, the law is quite clear on my rights. Lila looked at Rebecca's terrified face, at Jonah poised to die defending her, at the men ready for violence. May was dead. Nothing could change that, but she could save the living.
I'll come, she said quietly, if you let Rebecca and Jonah leave safely.
No, Jonah's voice was sharp. Lila, don't.
It's my choice, she said, meeting his eyes. My sister is dead. I won't have anyone else die for me.
Smart girl, Hale approved. Mr. McCrae, you'll drop that rifle and leave, now, or things get unpleasant for everyone. For a long moment, Lila thought Jonah would refuse, would start shooting and damn the consequences. But slowly, he lowered the rifle. This isn't over, Hale. Of course not. You'll run to that deputy friend of yours, raise a fuss. But Miss Monroe will be in my legal custody by then. A hysterical woman who needs care and protection. Happens all the time. Hale's smile was victorious. Unless you'd prefer to settle this more permanently, I have plenty of room behind the chapel. Jonah climbed down from the loft, movements careful and controlled. As he passed Lila, he murmured, I'll come for you.
I know,
she whispered back. Then he was gone, taking Rebecca with him, and Lila was alone with the wolves. Excellent, Hale said. Now, my dear, let's discuss your education. You've been telling lies about me, causing disruption. That needs to stop. Everything I said was true. Truth is subjective. Your truth threatens my work here, good work, saving fallen women, providing them purpose. He gestured to his men. Escort Miss Monroe to the reflection room. Gently, we're not barbarians. Rough hands seized her arms. As they marched her toward the house, Lila glimpsed the chapel in the moonlight. Somewhere behind it, May lay in an unmarked grave. The thought should have broken her, but instead, she felt steel enter her spine. She'd found her sister. Now she needed to survive long enough to get justice for her. The house was a maze of corridors and locked doors. Behind some, she heard weeping. Behind others, silence that was worse. They brought her to a small room, bare walls, single chair, barred window. You'll stay here until you're ready to be reasonable, Hale said. Food and water twice a day. No visitors. Time to reflect on your choices. You can't hold me forever. Can't I? You came here voluntarily? Multiple witnesses saw that. You're clearly disturbed. Your recent behavior proves it. I'm simply providing care until you're well enough to rejoin society. His smile was cold. Some women take months to recover. Some never quite manage it. The door closed with a final click. Lila was left in darkness, alone with the knowledge of May's fate and the weight of her own foolishness. But not despair. Jonah would come. Rosa would search. And somewhere in this house of horrors, there was evidence, real evidence of what Hale truly was. She settled into the chair, thinking they'd taken her knife but hadn't searched carefully. She still had hairpins, the knowledge Jonah had shared about working with limited tools, and most importantly, she had certainty now. May was dead, murdered by neglect, if not outright violence. Haley thought he'd won by trapping her here, but he'd actually given her exactly what she needed: access to his secrets and the women who could expose them. The night deepened around the house. Somewhere, a woman sobbed. Another prayed in a broken voice, but Lila Monroe sat straight-backed in her chair, dry-eyed and planning. She'd found May, though too late. Now she would find justice. And Hale would learn that some spirits were harder to break than others. Dawn brought no comfort to the reflection room, only pale light through barred windows. Lila had spent the night testing every board, every bar, every possible weakness. The room was well built for its purpose, holding women who didn't want to be held. But she'd also listened. The house had its own language of creaks and footsteps, sobs and whispers. She'd mapped the guards' routines, noted which floorboards squealed, identified at least 3 other women in nearby rooms by their crying patterns. When the door finally opened, it wasn't Hale who entered, but a severe woman in gray wool, carrying a tray. "Breakfast," the woman announced, setting down watery porridge and stale bread. "Eat or don't, makes no difference to me." "Are you Mrs. Garrett?" Lila asked, remembering the name from Rosa's research. "The matron." The woman's eyes narrowed. "No talking, Mr. Hale's orders." "He killed my sister," Lila said clearly. "May Monroe. She died here last winter." "Mrs." Garrett's face tightened almost imperceptibly. "Many take sick in winter, not Mr. Hale's fault if they're weak. Weak or denied proper medical care." The slap came fast, snapping Lila's head sideways. "I said no talking. Next time, you'll lose the meal too." After she left, Lila touched her stinging cheek and smiled grimly. She'd hit a nerve. Mrs. Garrett knew about May, remembered her. That was a start. The morning crawled by. Lila forced herself to eat, knowing she'd need strength. Through the walls, she heard movement women being marched somewhere, voices giving orders. Once, she thought she heard singing, high and broken. Near noon, commotion erupted outside. Horses, shouting. Hale's voice raised in anger. Lila pressed against the window but could see only a slice of the yard. Then footsteps pounded down the hall, and her door flew open. "Up," Crenshaw ordered. "Boss wants you." He hauled her roughly through the house to Hale's study, a room that spoke of wealth and respectability, all leather-bound books and gleaming wood. Hale stood behind his desk, face dark with fury. "Your friends have been busy," he said without preamble. "That Mexican deputy has a federal marshal asking questions. About you, about my operation." Hope flared in Lila's chest. "Then you'll have to let me go." "Will I?" Hale came around the desk. Movements controlled, but dangerous. "A federal badge doesn't mean much out here, especially when the marshal finds a hysterical woman who admits she came here voluntarily, seeking her sister's ghost." "I'm not hysterical." "Aren't you?" He gestured to Crenshaw, who produced a document. "This is a statement, already witnessed by Mrs. Garrett and Dr. Paulson. Yes, I have a doctor on staff, quite legal. It says you've been suffering delusions, that you've admitted your sister died of natural causes, that you beg my forgiveness for your false accusations." "I won't sign that." "Oh, I think you will." Hale's smile was cold. "You see, Rebecca, the girl who helped you last night, is still here. I decided her contract needed extended review. Her fate depends entirely on your cooperation." Lila's hands clenched. "You're a monster." "I'm a businessman, and a patient one. You'll sign, Miss Monroe. Today, tomorrow, next week. Eventually, you'll sign." He nodded to Crenshaw. "Take her back. No meals until she's ready to be reasonable." Back in the reflection room, Lila paced the small space, mind racing. Rosa had gotten federal help, but Hale was prepared. He'd use Rebecca as leverage, starve her, break her down, unless... A soft tap at the wall interrupted her thoughts. She froze, then heard it again. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, a pattern. Carefully, she responded with the same pattern. A moment later, a voice came through, muffled but audible. "You're May's sister." Not a question. "I'm Sarah. I knew her." Lila pressed against the wall. "Tell me about her, please." "She taught me letters, said education was freedom. Hale hated that." A pause. "She hid things, papers, proof of what happens here." "Where?" "Chapel, loose stone behind the altar. She said if anything happened to her, someone should know.
Lila's heart raced. Are you sure? She made me memorize it. Said her sister would come looking, would need evidence. Sarah's voice dropped. There's talk of moving us. Hale's scared of that marshal. If he moves us, no one will ever find us again.
When?
Soon. Tonight. Maybe tomorrow. He's got wagons ready.
Lila closed her eyes.
She needed to get to that chapel, find May's hidden evidence. But how could she escape a locked room in a guarded house?
The answer came with the dinner misses. Garrett didn't bring, as Lila had expected. Hunger was to be her first punishment, but hunger she could handle. What she couldn't handle was inaction. She studied the door lock again. Simple mechanism, probably installed quickly to convert regular rooms to cells. Her hairpins were still hidden in her boot they'd searched carelessly, assuming a proper lady wouldn't know what to do with them anyway. Jonah had taught her different in those long cabin nights, showing her tricks his grandfather had learned from a reformed thief. Never know when you might need to get out of somewhere fast, he'd said. She bent the pins carefully, working by feel. The lock was stubborn but not complex. After an hour of patient work, she heard the click. The door eased open. The hallway was empty, but she could hear voices from below guards at dinner. Maybe. She moved silently, blessing the soft boots she'd worn. Other doors lined the corridor, all locked. Behind one, someone wept. Behind another, silence. She wanted to free them all, but that would bring instant discovery. First, the evidence. Then she could help everyone. The house was a maze, but she'd paid attention when they'd brought her in. She found the back stairs, crept down to what looked like a service entrance. Voices approached, and she pressed into an alcove, holding her breath. 2 guards passed, complaining about the cold and Hale's paranoia. When they were gone, she slipped outside. The night was crisp, stars brilliant overhead. The chapel sat 50 yards away, a small stone building that predated Hale's ownership. Lila ran for it, expecting shouts of discovery at any moment. The chapel door was unlocked. Who would rob a church inside? Moonlight filtered through plain windows, illuminating rough pews and a simple altar. Lila went straight to it, running her hands along the backstones. There one stone wiggled slightly. She worked it free, heart pounding. Behind it, a wrapped bundle. By moonlight, she examined May's legacy. Letters from women describing their treatment, financial records showing money taken but never sent to families, and most damning, a doctor's journal not Dr. Paulson, but an earlier man who'd quit in disgust, documenting deliberate medical neglect, punishment by starvation. Women worked to exhaustion. May had been thorough. She'd gathered evidence for months, planning to expose Hale, but she'd gotten sick first. And, touching reunion, Lila spun. Hale stood in the doorway, backlit by lanterns his men carried. He'd known. Somehow, he'd known she'd come here. Sarah talked to you through the walls, he said conversationally. We heard every word. Did you think we didn't monitor our guests' conversations? Trap within trap. Lila clutched the papers, mind racing for options. Give those to me. Hale continued. They're stolen property, gathered by a disturbed woman who died of her own weakness. These prove you're a murderer, Lila said. A thief, a man providing a valuable service. Hale interrupted. Do you know how many women I've saved from the streets given purpose if some are too weak to survive the Reformation process? That's God's will. God has nothing to do with what you do here. Doesn't he? Hale stepped into the chapel, and his men spread out, blocking escape. I take the fallen and give them meaning. If that meaning is serving my customers' needs, earning their keep, what's wrong with that supply and demand? Miss Monroe, the foundation of American enterprise. Slavery, you mean? Contract labor, he corrected. All perfectly legal. Those documents your sister stole, They prove nothing except that running a reformation facility is challenging work. But his eyes glittered with anger, and Lila knew the papers were more damning than he claimed. She backed toward the altar, still clutching them. "There's something else you should know," Hale said. "Your friend McCrae is on his way here, riding hard with that deputy and the marshal. They received a message that you were being tortured, begging for rescue." "I sent no message." "Of course not. I did in your name." His smile was triumphant. "When they arrive, they'll find you've broken into my chapel, stolen property, clearly deranged, and when they insist on searching the property, well, accidents happen in the dark. That marshal's been asking too many questions anyway." An ambush. Jonah was riding into an ambush. Fury rose in Lila's throat. "You won't get away with killing a federal marshal." "I won't kill anyone. My men will defend my property against armed intruders. Tragic misunderstanding. Happens all the time in the territories." Through the windows, Lila saw more lanterns moving, men taking positions. How long before Jonah arrived? How could she warn him? "Of course," Hale mused. "If you were to sign that statement, admit your delusions, perhaps the misunderstanding could be avoided. Your friends would find you safe, recovering under my care. No need for violence. And the women you're planning to move, they disappear forever. Business requires flexibility, but they'd be alive, as would your rescuers." He held out his hand. "The papers, Miss Monroe, and your cooperation. Or would you rather have more blood on your hands?" Lila looked at May's evidence. Years of careful documentation, her sister's final act of defiance. Then she thought of Jonah riding through the dark, noble and foolish, and heading into a trap. But as she stood there, torn, another sound cut through the night. Bells, ringing from the house. Urgent and chaotic. Shouts followed, and the orange glow of fire painted the windows. "What?" Hale spun toward the door. A guard ran in, panicked. "Fire! Sir, the women's wing! Someone set a fire!" "Rebecca." Sarah's voice came from the doorway. She stood there in her nightdress, other women behind her, faces lit by growing flames. She stayed behind to start it, said it was time to burn this place clean. Chaos erupted. Hale's men abandoned their ambush positions, running to fight the fire that threatened to consume their employer's fortune. Hale himself stood frozen, watching his empire begin to burn. May always said fire purified. Sarah told Lila. We remembered. The women streamed past, heading for freedom while their captors battled flames. Lila saw her chance and took it, ducking past Hale while he screamed orders no one was listening to. Outside, the night had gone mad. Women ran in all directions. Men shouted, organizing bucket brigades. Horses screamed in the stables as smoke billowed across the yard. And through it all came the thunder of hooves. Jonah appeared out of the darkness. Rosa and a man with a federal badge beside him. They'd seen the fire, abandoned stealth for speed. Lila. Jonah swung down before his horse fully stopped, catching her as she ran to him. Are you hurt? No, but it's a trap Hale was waiting. Not anymore, Rosa observed, watching Hale's men battle the flames. Looks like someone changed the game. The federal marshal, a stern man named Thompson, took charge quickly, ordering the fleeing women protected, organizing help for the fire brigade, and finally, arresting a soot-stained Hale when he tried to flee. You can't, Hale protested. These are lying women. Hysterical. Save it. Thompson cut him off. I've got enough testimonies to hang you twice over, and something tells me Miss Monroe has more evidence. Lila held out May's papers, water-stained from the firefighting but still readable. My sister gathered these, proof of everything. As Thompson reviewed them, his face darkened. This goes beyond Reformation fraud. This is slavery, plain and simple. The fire was controlled now. The women's wing badly damaged, but the rest of the building saved. Women huddled in groups, some weeping, others staring at the stars as if they'd forgotten such things existed. "Rebecca," Lila asked Sarah, "is she—" "Got out," Sarah assured her. "Burned her hands some, but she got out. Said it was worth it to see this place taste its own hell." Jonah hadn't let go of Lila since he'd dismounted. Now he turned her to face him, checking for injuries with the gentle hands. "When I got that message, I thought, I know, I'm sorry, I should have trusted you, waited for help." "You found your sister," he said softly. "Found the truth. She's dead." The words came easier now, grief settling into something bearable. "But she fought him. Right to the end, she fought." "Like her sister," Jonah murmured. Around them, the night slowly organized itself into something like order. Hale and his main accomplices were shackled, waiting for transport. The women were gathered, given blankets and food, promises of safe passage to wherever they wanted to go. The fire smoldered but no longer threatened. "It's over," Rosa said, joining them. "This place is finished. These women are free." But Lila looked at their faces scarred by more than physical wounds and knew it wasn't that simple. Freedom was just the beginning. Healing would take longer. "What happens to them now?" she asked. "That's up to them," Thompson said. "Some have families to return to. Others, well, there are places that help women start over. Real places, not like this." "I want to help," Lila said suddenly. "These women, others like them. I want to teach them, give them tools to protect themselves." "Dangerous work," Rosa warned. "Hale's not the only man running operations like this." "Then they need stopping too," Lila said simply. Jonah's arm tightened around her. "We need stopping," he corrected. "You're not doing this alone." She looked up at him. This man who'd saved her, supported her, ridden into an ambush for her. "Are you sure it's not the quiet ranch life you planned?" "Plans change," he said, "sometimes for the better." As dawn broke over Black Rock, painting the sky rose and gold, the last of the women were led to safety. Lila stood with Jonah, watching Hale's empire crumble, feeling May's presence in the morning wind. Justice had come late, but it had come, and from the ashes of this place, something new would grow, something clean. "Ready to go home?" Jonah asked. Lila thought of the unmarked grave she still needed to visit, the proper burial May deserved, the work ahead, helping women reclaim their lives. The man beside her, offering partnership in all of it. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready." They rode away as the sun climbed higher, leaving Black Rock to its ghosts, and heading toward a future neither had planned, but both had chosen. Together, the dry autumn had turned the grasslands to tinder. 2 weeks after Black Rock, Jonah stood on the ridge overlooking the valley, unease prickling his spine. The wind carried something wrong, not smoke, not yet, but the brittle tension that came before disaster. "Going to be a bad one," his father said, joining him. "Haven't seen conditions like this since '73. They'd been moving cattle to the river pastures all week, preparing for the possibility of fire. But preparations only went so far when the whole territory was a tinderbox waiting for a spark. "Any word from town?" Jonah asked. "Rosa sent a rider. Says Hale's men have scattered since the arrest. Some hired on with other outfits, but others—" Samuel McCrae shook his head. "Men like that don't forget. They blame you and Miss Monroe for their troubles." Jonah's jaw tightened. Lila had thrown herself into helping the rescued women, working with Rosa and Mrs. Whistler to find them positions, teach them letters, rebuild their lives. She was at the boarding house now, teaching 3 former captives to read. "I should check on her. She's safe in town," his father said, but doubt colored his voice. They both knew safety was relative when vengeful men had nothing left to lose. The first smoke appeared at sunset, a dark column rising from the direction of Sawyer's Creek, 10 miles north. Within an hour, 3 more fires bloomed across the horizon. "That's not natural," Samuel said grimly.
That's torches.
They rallied every hand on the ranch, sending riders to warn neighbors, preparing to defend their land. But as full dark fell, the wind shifted, and Jonah's blood went cold. The fires were being set strategically, driven by the wind toward settled areas. Toward town. I'm going, he told his father, already saddling Buttercup. I'm coming with you, Samuel said, but Jonah shook his head. Need you here. If this spreads. He didn't finish. They both knew what wildfire could do to a ranch. He rode hard through smoke-hazed darkness, the glow of multiple fires painting the sky orange. Other riders passed him, families fleeing, men riding to help, chaos beginning its reign. By the time he reached Willow Bend, the town was in full panic. Jonah Rosa appeared through the smoke, badge gleaming in the firelight. Thank God, I've got every able-body working bucket brigades, but if this wind doesn't shift... Where's Lila? Still at Whistler's, far as I know. She wouldn't evacuate, said the women needed... He didn't wait to hear more. The boarding house was on the far side of town, directly in the path of the advancing flames. Jonah spurred Buttercup through streets packed with fleeing townsfolk, wagons, and terrified livestock. He found Lila in the street outside Whistler's, helping load salvaged possessions onto a wagon while smoke billowed overhead. You need to leave, he said without preamble. Now. Not until everyone's out, she replied, soot-streaked but calm. Sarah's still inside, getting the cash box. It's all misses. Whistler has... An explosion of flame erupted 2 blocks away as a feed store caught fire. The heat hit like a physical blow, and horses screamed in terror. There's no time, Jonah insisted. The whole town's going up. Then help us, Lila shot back. Don't argue, just help. He dismounted, knowing argument was useless. Together they hauled the last trunks onto the wagon as Sarah emerged with the precious cash box. Mrs. Whistler sat on the driver's bench, face stoic despite tears cutting tracks through the soot. 60 years I've lived here, she said. 60 years, and now? You're alive, Lila said firmly. That's what matters. We can rebuild. They got the wagon moving, joining the stream of evacuees heading for the river. But the fire was faster, leaping from building to building with terrifying hunger. The very air seemed to burn. Smoke so thick breathing became a struggle. Then Jonah heard it, the panicked lowing of cattle. The stock pens, he breathed. There's 50 head in the stock pens. Let them burn, someone shouted. Save yourselves! But Jonah was already running toward the sound, and Lila was right behind him. The pens were at the edge of town, forgotten in the chaos. 50 head of prime beef, worth a fortune to their owners, now trapped behind rails as fire approached. Help me with the gates, Jonah shouted over the roar. Together they wrestled with the heavy bars, heat searing their faces. The cattle milled in terror, too panicked to recognize salvation. They won't move, Lila coughed. They're too scared. Need something to lead them. Jonah looked around desperately, then spotted it, a bell hanging on the pen's corner post. Used to call cattle to feed. He grabbed it, ringing hard. The familiar sound cut through panic. A few cattle turned, training overcoming fear. Lila grabbed a feed bucket, shaking it as she backed toward safety. Come on, she called. Come on, girls. One cow moved, then another. The herd instinct kicked in, and suddenly they were all moving, following the bell and bucket away from the flames. Jonah and Lila led them through the smoke, joining them to the larger exodus. That was foolish, Rosa said when they caught up. Could have died for some cows. Could have, Jonah agreed. Didn't. They made it to the river as the fire crowned, leaping from tree to tree in spectacular arcs. The water was chaos, people, animals, wagons, all crowding the banks. Some stood in the shallows, ready to go deeper if the flames jumped the river. "Organization," Rosa shouted. "We need organization, women and children in the water first. Men, form bucket brigades. We can save some of these buildings if we work together." Slowly, order emerged from chaos. Bucket lines formed, water flying hand to hand. Women and children huddled in the shallows while men fought to save what they could. Lila worked alongside everyone else, her Eastern dresses soaked and ruined, hair hanging in wet strings. "Look out!" The warning came just as a burning timber crashed down from a warehouse roof. Jonah yanked Lila aside, both of them tumbling into the mud as fire rained down where they'd been standing. "Thanks," she gasped. "We're even," he replied, helping her up. But the night wasn't done with disasters. A scream cut through the noise, high, terrified, young. "That's Jenny Sawyer," someone said. "Where's Jenny?" "There," Lila pointed. A small figure clung to a log in the river, swept downstream by the current. The girl had gone too deep, lost her footing, and now fought to keep her head above water. Jonah dove in without thinking. The current was stronger than expected. Fed by upstream snowmelt, he struck out hard, fighting for every foot as Jenny was swept further away. Behind him, he heard Lila organizing a human chain into the water. He caught Jenny just as her strength gave out, grabbing her dress as she went under. "Got you!" he gasped. "I've got you!" But the current had them both now. His weak arm screamed protest as he fought to keep them afloat. The human chain was too far away. They swept past it, heading for the rapids downstream. Then a rope sailed through the air, landing across his shoulders. Lila stood thigh-deep in the current, the other end wrapped around her waist while a line of people anchored her. "Hold on!" she shouted. Jonah grabbed the rope with his good hand, clutching Jenny with his weak arm. The current tried to tear them away, but the human chain held, hand over hand. They were pulled to safety. On the bank, Jenny's parents wept with relief while Jonah collapsed in the mud, chest heaving. Lila knelt beside him, her own breathing ragged. "Your arm," she said. "Is it—" "Worth it," he interrupted. "Like those cows, like everything tonight, worth it." She smiled through the soot and tears. "You're impossible." "You followed me," he pointed out. "What's that make you?" The fire raged through the night, but the river held it. By dawn, Willow Bend's west side was ash and embers, but the east side stood. Exhausted people sprawled along the riverbank, some weeping for losses, others just grateful to breathe. "Could have been worse," Rosa said, surveying the damage. "Would have been, without everyone working together." "Any word on who set the fires?" Samuel McCrae asked. He'd arrived with more McCrae hands as the flames died down. "Working on it," Rosa said grimly. "But I've got my suspicions. Crenshaw hasn't been seen since yesterday. Neither have 6 other former Hale men." "Revenge," Lila said quietly. "Because we stopped him." "Because you stopped him," Rosa corrected. "This has your name written all over it, Miss Monroe. Question is, what do we do about it?" "We rebuild, Mrs.," Whistler said firmly. The old woman stood straight despite the night's ordeal. "They wanted to burn us out, fine. We build back better, and we don't let fear win." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Jonah saw determination replacing despair on soot-stained faces. "I'll help," Lila said. "I have some money saved." "We all help," Samuel interrupted. "That's how it works out here. Today you, tomorrow me. Circle M will provide lumber, labor, whatever's needed." Others joined in with pledges of aid. The spirit that had fought the fire together would rebuild together. As the sun climbed higher, revealing the full extent of damage, people began the slow work of salvaging what they could. Jonah and Lila worked side by side, pulling treasures from the ashes, a partially burned photograph here, a miraculously intact cookbook there. "I'm sorry," Lila said suddenly. "This is my fault. If I hadn't pursued Hale, then he'd still be enslaving women. Jonah cut her off. Evil men do evil things. That's on them, not you. But the cost? Look around. He gestured to the people working together, sharing water and food, comforting each other. See any blame in their faces, any regret that you stood up to Hale? She looked and saw only determination, community, resilience. Jenny Sawyer ran up and hugged her, still wrapped in a borrowed blanket. Her parents followed, tears of gratitude replacing last night's terror. No words are enough, Jenny's mother said. But thank you, both of you. As they moved on, Lila leaned against Jonah. I don't understand. They lost so much because of me. They lost things, he corrected. Buildings, goods, all replaceable. You helped them keep their dignity, their freedom. That's not replaceable. The day wore on in salvage and planning. Rosa organized search parties for the fire setters. Samuel coordinated rebuilding efforts. And through it all, people shared what they had, bonding over common loss and common purpose. That evening, as the sun set over the blackened landscape, Marshal Thompson arrived with news. Caught 3 of them headed for the territorial border, he announced. Crenshaw and 2 others had oil-soaked rags and matches on them. They'll hang for arson. The others? Rosa asked. Still hunting, but word's out. Every lawman in 3 territories is looking. He turned to Lila. They confessed to targeting you specifically. Miss Monroe wanted you to burn with the town. Lila shivered despite the warm evening. Jonah's arm came around her automatically. They failed, she said simply. We're still here, still standing. Together, Jonah added. As darkness fell, people gathered around campfires on the riverbank, sharing meals cobbled together from salvaged supplies. Someone produced a fiddle, miraculously saved, and music drifted across the water. Not celebration, too much loss for that, but affirmation. We survive. We continue. We rebuild. Lila stood at the water's edge, looking across at the ruined section of town. Tomorrow, the real work would begin clearing debris, hauling lumber, raising new buildings. It would take months, maybe years, to fully recover. But they would recover together. Penny for them, Jonah said, joining her. Thinking about May, she admitted. She always said I was too stubborn for my own good, that I'd bite off more than I could chew someday. She was right, Jonah said, earning a surprised look. But being stubborn got justice for her, freed those women, brought this town together. Sometimes more than you can chew is exactly the right amount. Lila smiled, leaning into his warmth. Speaking of more than we can chew when this is over, the rebuilding. I want to start a real school, not just teaching letters to a few women, but a proper school. Education for anyone who wants it. Sounds like you'll need help, Jonah observed. I was hoping you'd say that. They stood together as the river flowed past, carrying ash and sorrow toward the sea. Behind them, their community sang and planned and refused to be broken. Ahead lay work and challenge and purpose. But tonight, in this moment between disaster and rebuilding, they had each other and the knowledge that some things, courage, love, justice, couldn't be burned away. The fire had tested them all, and together, they'd proven stronger than the flames. 6 months had passed since the Great Fire. Spring painted the valley green, and where ash once lay, new buildings rose from the earth like fresh shoots. The schoolhouse stood proudest among them, whitewashed boards gleaming in the morning sun, windows thrown open to catch the breeze carrying the scent of sage and new grass. Lila stood at the doorway, watching her students file in. Not just women now, but children of all ages, ranch hands who'd never learned letters, anyone hungry for knowledge. The bell she rang had been cast from melted remnants of the fire, a reminder that beauty could rise from destruction. Morning, Miss Monroe. Sarah called out, her own child on her hip. She'd married Tom Bradley, the blacksmith, and seemed to glow with newfound peace. "Good morning, Sarah. How's little Mary today?" "Growing like a weed. Dr. Wilson says she's the healthiest baby he's seen all year." Dr. Wilson, not Paulson, who'd fled after Hale's arrest, but a young physician from back east who'd arrived to help after the fire and decided to stay. The town was changing, growing, healing. Inside the schoolhouse, Lila began the day's lessons, but her mind wandered to the evening ahead. Tonight was special. Tonight, after months of courtship conducted between rebuilding efforts and teaching duties, she and Jonah would finally speak their vows. The day passed in a blur of arithmetic and reading primers. When the final student left, Lila found Mrs. Whistler waiting with a package. "Your sister's things," the older woman said gently. "Rosa was finally able to retrieve them from that awful place. Thought you should have them before tonight." Lila's hands trembled as she opened the worn bag. Inside were May's few possessions, a Bible with pressed flowers, letters from home, and at the bottom, wrapped in cloth, a small silver locket. "My mother's," Lila breathed, tears starting. "May wore it always. I thought it was lost forever." "Nothing's lost forever." "Mrs.?" Whistler said, patting her shoulder. "Sometimes things just take the long way home." As afternoon shadows lengthened, the town began gathering on the hillside overlooking the valley. Simple benches had been arranged. Wild flowers wound around posts, and Jake Morrison tuned his fiddle while folks found their places. Jonah stood at the makeshift altar, his father beside him as witness. He'd never looked more handsome, dressed in his best shirt, hair slicked back, that steady gaze finding Lila the moment she appeared. She walked alone, no father to give her away, no sister to stand beside her, but she wasn't lonely. The whole town had become her family, their faces beaming as she passed. She wore her mother's dress, carefully mended and altered, with May's locket at her throat. Reverend Davis, the circuit preacher who'd replaced Hale's mockery of faith, smiled warmly as she reached the altar. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we gather on this hillside, under God's own sky, to witness something special. Not just a union of two people, but a testament to what love can build from ashes." The ceremony was simple, words as plain as the frontier demanded. But when Jonah spoke his vows, his voice carried across the hillside with quiet certainty. "Lila Monroe, that first night I found you, I thought I was just offering shelter, but you gave me purpose. You showed me that strength isn't about what your body can do, but what your spirit refuses to surrender. I promise to stand beside you, support your dreams, and face whatever comes, today, tomorrow, and all the days after." Lila's voice was steady despite her tears. "Jonah McCrae, you gave me safety when I had none, belief when I doubted myself, and partnership when I thought I'd always stand alone. You held me that night not just to warm my body, but to save my soul. I choose you now as I've chosen you every day since, completely, freely, and forever." "The rings?" Reverend Davis asked. Luke's ring, resized for Lila. A new band for Jonah, forged by Tom Bradley from silver dollars donated by the townspeople. Symbols of community as much as commitment. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined, let no man put asunder." The kiss was brief, proper, but in it was promise of all the private moments to come. The crowd erupted in cheers, fiddle music soaring across the valley. The celebration that followed was frontier simple but rich in joy. Long tables groaned under potluck offerings. Children ran between the adults' legs, while dogs hoped for dropped scraps. Stories flowed as freely as the apple cider, punctuated by laughter and music. "Never thought I'd see the day," Samuel McCrae said, raising his glass. "My son, married to a woman who can out-stubborn a mule and outthink most men. Jonah, You've met your match. Lila, welcome to the family, Brun. May you always find shelter in each other. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Rosa approached with an envelope. "Wedding present from Marshall Thompson," she said. "Thought you'd want to know they caught the last of Crenshaw's gang. More importantly, the federal government's funding a full investigation into operations like Hale's across the territories. Your testimony started something big, Lila." "Our testimony," Lila corrected, linking her arm through Jonah's. "None of this happened alone." As evening deepened, the newlyweds made their farewells. Their destination wasn't far the original cabin where they'd first found shelter. Now, expanded and improved, would be their home while they built on the land Samuel had gifted them. "Wait," someone called. Jenny Sawyer ran up, clutching something. Mrs. McCrae, this is for you." It was a sampler, carefully stitched with slightly crooked letters. "Home is where love lives." "I made it in sewing class," Jenny said proudly. "To remember." Lila hugged the girl tightly. "It's perfect, thank you." They rode away as the first stars appeared, leaving the celebration still in full swing. The journey to the cabin was quiet, comfortable, full of promise. "No regrets?" Jonah asked as they arrived. "How could I regret the path that brought me to you?" Lila replied. "Even the darkness was worth it for this light." Inside the cabin, now warm and welcoming with proper furniture and windows, Lila touched familiar walls with wonder. "It's strange. This place that saved my life is now where I'll truly start living." "Our life," Jonah corrected, drawing her close. "Everything from now on is ours." They stood by the window, looking out at the vast Wyoming night. Somewhere beyond the hills lay May's proper grave, marked now with a stone bearing her name and the words, "Teacher, sister, fighter for truth." The women she'd tried to save were scattered across the territories, building new lives. The school would educate generations. And here, in a cabin that had sheltered desperation, hope had built a home. "You know what they used to whisper in town?" Lila said softly. "Rancher's son found the naked virgin lost on the trail in his cabin. He held her tight." Such ugly words for something that saved me. "Let them whisper," Jonah said, turning her to face him. "We know the truth. That night I held you to keep you warm, to keep you alive. Tonight I hold you because I choose you, because you chose me, because we chose each other." "Forever," she whispered. "Forever," he agreed. As they embraced in the lamplight, the circle completed itself. From desperate flight to quiet triumph, from isolation to community, from fear to love. The West had tested them with its harshness, and they'd answered with resilience. Evil men had tried to break them, and they'd responded by breaking the chains that bound others. Outside, coyotes called across the valley and winds sang through the sage. Inside, two people who'd found each other in darkness celebrated their journey into light. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not a rescue, but a partnership. Not a scandal, but a love story. And in the morning, they would rise together, build together, face whatever came together. Because that's what you did when you'd looked into the abyss and chosen to reach for each other instead of letting go. The cabin that had once sheltered a desperate woman now sheltered a family. The arms that had once held her to save her life now held her in celebration of the life they'd chosen to share. Some stories end with sunset rides and dramatic declarations. This one ended with two people. Tea instead of coffee steaming on the table. Planning lessons for the school and improvements for the ranch. Arguing gently about whether to plant wheat or corn in the south field. It ended with ordinary life made extraordinary by the journey to reach it. It ended with love hard won, freely chosen, forever promised. And somewhere in the Wyoming night, May Monroe's spirit smiled, knowing her sister had found what she'd gone west, seeking not just truth or justice, but a place to belong, a person to belong with, and the courage to claim both. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Friends, I hope it touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it with you. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Please leave a comment below, and let's connect over our shared love of these Wild West tales. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more authentic frontier stories that explore the courage, passion, and resilience of the American West. Don't forget to give this video a like and hit that hype button to help more listeners discover these powerful narratives. Until next time, may you find your own courage in the face of storms. And remember, sometimes the greatest adventures begin when we choose to hold tight to what matters most.